Hello Guardians, and welcome to a brand new video. This one is very different from any video that I've done so far. As an avid Destiny player since Destiny 1's alpha, the story of the game has always been a fascination for me. Although not a perfect story, it was one interesting enough to have me explore the lore and look deep into the story whenever I was curious. I am in no means an expert of Destiny lore similar to that of My Name is Bife. However, there are some issues with the story that I can see without needing to be a certified lore expert. Bungie is currently in the middle of telling a story of a quote-unquote single evolving world that our Guardian can take part in and feel a part of. With Season of the Worthy just around the corner, they are looking to add a new chapter to this story. However, a few things do bother me with how this approach has been handled so far. There is a lack of concrete connectivity between the narratives of each season, as well as Bungie's own actions clashing with this evolving world they're attempting to build. Note that I will only be tackling issues with the story and not necessarily the activities in terms of their mechanics or if they're good from a gameplay perspective. I will mainly focus on storytelling aspects, their issues so far, as well as a few story gripes along the way. This is going to be a long one. I suggest either keeping this safe for watching when you have the time, or just in the car on your way to work. Nevertheless, let's get on with the video. To begin, I will state that the connecting story threads from the Shadowkeep campaign into the Garden of Salvation raid, which then led into the Vex offensive, was a good start. The building of the Vex Gate was a neat touch, but it felt very shallow as we had very little involvement in helping with its creation. We only used it at the end of the season where we destroyed all copies of the Undying Mind. Even when we destroyed the Undying Mind and its copies, we didn't know the effects of what we were doing. Only until we got the trailer of Season of Dawn, as well as the narrative previews, did we know what effect we were having on the world. This runs contrary to the idea of an evolving world. In an evolving world, I should know what my effects on the world are without having to leave the reality of the game. I am not asking for Bungie to outright tell us the consequences of our actions immediately, or to do away with the previews and trailers, but there should be hints regarding where the story is taking us next. I've come up with an idea how they could do that. For instance, after the first week of destroying Undying Mind copies, players who go to Mercury will notice a large number of Red Legion than the usual amount. Maybe we have some named CABAL roaming the area that we haven't seen before. Then the next week, we notice more CABAL on Mercury. Then on the final week, Mercury becomes a flashpoint, and we notice that there are CABAL champions among the mini-bosses that roam the area during the flashpoint week. These champions would have to be weaker than normal champions, due to non-season pass owners having access to Mercury, but not having artifact mods to fight against the champions. This would mirror the Swords of Crota and the Roaming Wolves that preceded the Dark Below and House of Wolves expansion from Destiny 1 respectively. That would give us a hint as to our next destination being Mercury, while still leaving the mystery as to why the CABAL are more present in the area. Another issue in Season of the Undying stems from the lack of emphasis on what we were actually doing in the final weeks of the season. Ikora does mention in the first week of implementing the Vex Gate that Zavala and herself had tested out the gate. They successfully pulled a copy of the Undying Mind and destroyed it. However, the fact that these are copies that we're pulling out of the gate is barely touched upon thereafter. So, when players finally destroyed the Undying Mind copy for the first time, there was an expectation in players' minds of something big happening or there being a big reveal. Most players believed it to be the Undying Mind and not a copy. I don't blame players for being confused after their first run. If we had a cutscene where we saw Ikora and Zavala doing what Ikora tells us, we would immediately recognize that we are killing copies, or at the very least, know that the Undying Mind we are killing is not the Undying Mind. Also, if Ikora had talked about the copies of the Undying Mind between encounters in the Vex offensive, players would surely understand the situation. For even more clarity, the final week could have had a visibly different model of the Undying Mind, in which it would signal to players that this was the Undying Mind, and this was our final action for the season. Furthermore, If Bungie wanted to connect players to Destiny 1 where the Undying Mine originated from, Ikora could have sold a reprised Imago Loop or Imago Loop bounty similar to the other Vex offensive weapon bounties during that final week, as well as adding it to the world drop pool after the season is over. Adding it to the world loot pool would make sense since we've killed numerous Undying Mines over the course of the final weeks. There would be a near limitless supply of Imago Loops lying around the entire system. All in all, the beginning of the season had its potential, but the lack of experience in the evolving world approach was very apparent by the end of this first season. Now we move on to Season of Dawn. We are told by Osiris about our actions' effects on Mercury as well as what is happening on Mercury while we were taking care of the Vex offensive. We are told of the sundial, its effects on the planet, and why Osiris created it. Osiris tells us all this throughout the season by both speech and by wall of text. These two methods clash with one another. It breaks the immersion of being within the world if Osiris speaks to me in 1 minute, then I have to read what is essentially a sign he's holding to know what he wants to say in the next. Not all quest steps need to be spoken. However, if Bungie chooses to have a character speak to us, have them speak to us completely and have the text on the side be the equivalent of a TLDR, too long didn't read. If they choose to have a wall of text, keep it short and concise. Destiny is an action game, not a visual novel. If they want to do a wall of text, that should remain as a lore tab or a lore entry. If cost is the issue, which I cannot say for sure since I am not involved with Bungie, then if they have to use the wall of text because of the voice acting budget, then keep it consistent. Wall of text the whole way through, or speak to me the whole way through. Not a mixture of both. Now we move on to the sundial. When we get into the objectives of the sundial, it is greatly emphasized during these runs that we are destroying the multiple timelines that the CABAL have created. They have created these timelines in an effort to rewrite history in such a way that they win the Red War, or just become unbeatable conquerors of the system, causing the Traveler to hide or be outright destroyed. Contrary to Season of the Undying, our actions in the sundial are clear. There is no confusion as we are told exactly what we are doing. It sets our expectations accordingly. The Saint 14 storyline was a great story beat for longtime fans. It gives us an insight to Saint's experiences, how desperate humanity was during the Dark Age directly, and it gives us a direct role in the story to where we save Saint from his death in our current reality. However, not seeing a cutscene between Osiris and Saint after he comes out of the Infinite Forest was severely disappointing. It would have offered a different view of Osiris. Usually a stern and straight-faced man, he would have shown to have emotion as he greets Saint after so many years of him being dead. It was a huge missed opportunity. Overall though, the Saint storyline was done very well in terms of its story and world building, despite the hiccups along the way. Next we come to the Corridors of Time event, which, outside of the controversy of its rewards, left more to be desired in the end of this community puzzle. Through rigorous effort and research, we made our way through the corridors to find what lies in wait in the Timeless Vault. We finally come across a coffin of what appears to be a Guardian. Here, we then discover that this is our coffin. We find out about our future death and of a weapon which is regarded by Saint 14 as, quote, our favorite weapon. There are two issues that pop up here. 1. What did we die from? During our eulogy, Saint 14 does seem to be aware of us being able to rip through time. If so, wouldn't it be a good idea to let us know what led to our demise? 2. Calling Bastion our favorite weapon is a bad move for the narrative. I know that the big reason Bungie made our characters mute for years was to allow us to make Guardians how we see fit in our own personal headcanon. However, we never had a say in what we did. We couldn't refuse to go on missions, and we didn't make different choices in the story. Our characters' thoughts were being read and said for us by our ghost, which was very awkward as our ghost essentially became the main character, and we were a vehicle for the story to progress. We were nothing but a plot device. It ruined their intended goal. After enough feedback from the community, Bungie finally gave our characters their voice back. It no longer made us a plot device. We were now active participants in the plot. Of course, this gives Bungie some free reign on how to make our characters behave the way they want in certain aspects. That is a small price to pay for creating a better story, where we feel a part of it rather than a thing that only pushes it forward. However, a small thing like making a specific gun our favorite is highly unnecessary and honestly pretty laughable. There are numerous other weapons that could easily be deemed a favorite over Bastion. A better approach would have been to have Saint 14 say that this is his weapon and he is leaving it with us as a parting gift. That would get rid of that issue entirely and cement just how much Saint 14 adores us and how much we mean to him. He gave us a weapon that was made by the speaker, who he saw as his own father. He left us with that weapon because of how much we mean to our pigeon-loving friend. The finale of the Sundial was a very good way to end off the final timelines. We see the final boss is a combination of the past 3 Scions that we've faced before. This is well done as we don't need narrative previews to give us an idea of what we're facing. It's in-game. Also, there were no grand expectations when we killed the boss for the first time. The constant reminder of multiple timelines that we need to scrub from the Sundial lets players know that running the Sundial constantly makes sense in terms of the narrative. This is a better approach than Season of the Undying, where it was the equivalent of name-dropping someone, that these Undying minds that we had destroyed were just copies being pulled from other timelines. Season of Dawn makes it perfectly clear for the community, and it lets us know that the work is not done until the season is over. The Devil's Ruin quest was a great quest to add a bit of world building to the game, such as crucible matches being scheduled in universe, and the relationship between Saint, Shaxx, and Osiris. Despite how short the quest was, it did bring some great world building and alleviated some of the issues I stated with the lack of a visible friendship between Saint and Osiris. We now move to the Empyrean Foundation. It is stated in-game that Saint is asking for our help in building something to, quote, prepare for the future. This tells us that what we are doing will help us somewhere down the line, but it does not do it in such a way that it spoils what the purpose is. This is a great touch for a live component. Compared to the Vex Gate in the previous season, the donations needing to be made by players in order to bring about something is miles better than just watching something be built. We are actually active in the current events of this season from a story perspective. I will say that an in-game counter or tracker would have made things much better for a more seamless experience. However, the immersion breaking does happen once again with the Trials of Osiris Dev Insights trailer. It shows us what our efforts have achieved once we had hit the 7th milestone for the donation process. I am once again not asking for the trailer to just disappear, but it should be that cherry on top to the overall narrative being told within the game. A better approach would have been to have us go to Saint, where he tells us of his plans to bring back Trials of Osiris. If you go back to the dialogue between Shaxx and Saint 14 at the end of the Devil's Ruin quest, they talk about how the Crucible, quote, isn't what it used to be when they were training. Saint would tell us that Shaxx told him about Trials of Osiris and all the guardians that flocked to it for the battle hardening and, most importantly, the loot. Saint would question Shaxx as to why it is not held anymore. Shaxx would respond that Brother Vance is too busy with the old lighthouse to carry out the trials anymore. Thus, Saint comes up with a brilliant idea to create a new lighthouse so that he could bring Trials of Osiris back to prepare Guardians for the future ahead. Overall, the Foundation is a great improvement over the Vex Gate back in Season of the Undying. We now come to the cutscene where we see Osiris confront Rasputin. This is meant to set up the next season, which is a step up from the previous season where we were not given anything in-game to work with. It also lets us know that Osiris has seen simulations of timelines where Rasputin is hinted at being the key factor in the destruction of the light. We aren't told what Osiris saw, but from his actions and his words, we know that he means business. I can see no issues with this cutscene, and it avoids the issues that were present in the previous season. As we approach the last week of Season of Dawn, Bungie has dropped their trailer for the next season, Season of the Worthy. From what we can deduce from this trailer, the Cabal are utterly defeated by our efforts to stop their plans over the course of time since the Red War. In a last-ditch effort, they are cutting off power to the main engine to the Almighty, the weapon that Gaul would have used to destroy the solar system if he had won the Red War. By cutting off its power, the Cabal are having it drift into space on a trajectory towards the last city. In order to defend the city, we will enlist the help of Rasputin in order to prepare us for a, quote, difficult choice we must make, as Zavala puts it. Like I said before, the trailers being instrumental to linking the seasons together runs counter to Bungie's goal to create an evolving world. You can still have the trailer exactly the way it is, but there needs to be some mention of the Red Legion fleeing to the Almighty in-game. There is no dialogue from anyone that states that there have been reports of Cabal approaching the Almighty. It is only hinted at from lore on Bungie's Twitter, as well as Season of the Unworthy's Bungie.net page. Again, letting us know of the existence of the 4th Scion Flayer sister in-game would have been better than the trailer and website doing the heavy lifting. Story-wise, this season leaves some questions. 1. Was there no one guarding this giant Cabal weapon left floating in space? Were there any Vanguard scouts or any of Ikora's hidden keeping an eye on it? With this, on top of the web lore that states that the Vanguard was aware of the Hive's Shadow Keep, yet did nothing about it, this all makes the Vanguard look more inept than ever. Number 2. If we go off of what was said in the trailer, why can't we just get a bunch of ships to push the Almighty out of its path towards the last city? Anna Bray states that the Scions have cut power to the main engine to let it float off into space. If the ship is simply floating towards us, that means we can change its trajectory with ease since it has nothing powering it to move it towards the intended target. It would play out like the Hammerhead Corvette scene in Rogue One, where we just push the ship in a different direction since it has no power to it. Granted, this could all change when the season comes out, but so far, the story is looking very weak from the start. To conclude, this year in the Destiny universe is a flawed one in the story department. I will give Bungie some slack in that this is their first attempt in creating a continuous story over the course of a year. However, some of these mistakes are damaging to their goal and sometimes runs completely counter to it. If Bungie wants to continue with this evolving world, they need to add more story in-game, whether that be clear-cut or vague, and have any outside material be the cherry on top. Players should have an idea of what their actions will cause or know what else is happening in the world that is crucial for an evolving narrative. If you want to watch another video that explains some points I missed or for more detail on certain aspects, more focused on Season of the Dawn, I have linked a video made by DSR Joker who goes into greater detail on the issues of Bungie's storytelling so far. He makes some great points and I would recommend watching his stuff and subscribing to him if you enjoy it. He is very blunt with his criticism, but you won't get any fluff from him. To end this video, I want to put a spin on an old mantra for Bungie to keep in mind. Show in-game, don't tell outside of the game. Thank you for watching. I want to start a discussion in the comments. If there's anything that I missed, leave it in the comments. If there's anything that you want to debate about, I am gladly open for that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.